Welcome, creatives, art lovers, and dreamers to Somewhere and Elsewhere, where we uncover stories from artists across the coastal region.
I'm Terrill Williams.
And I'm Kevin Lee Y. Green, and we are the host here on Shoreside's program, Somewhere and Elsewhere. Today, we are with Ricki Nelson. Ricki, tell us a little bit about yourself and the amazing work you do as an artist.
My name is Ricki Nelson, as Kevin already said, and I am a filmmaker. I'm a poet. I am an actor, writer, director, and I am also the current Miss Black North Carolina, USA.
Yes, you are.
What initially sparked your interest in this field? Like, what drove you into film? What drove you into the talent of doing that?
That's a good question. So, growing up, my parents had like a local community theater company. So we were always doing like plays. My dad would build sets. My mom would like write and direct them. And so I really loved the community aspect that doing theater offered. And then when I went to college, I was originally going to just major in creative writing because I loved writing a lot and stuff. And then me and some friends at the time, we did a film club challenge, which was you had to come up with a trailer. And so we came up with a trailer. I wrote it. It was like this suspense, gritty, like Batman-y type vibes. And they ended up using salsa as the blood when the guy's like washing it off his hands. So it looked horrible, but it was like my first time seeing something I had written visually. And I just fell in love with it after that.
What pivotal moment or experience in your life significantly shaped who you are today? And how did you grow from it?
Ooh.
I'm asking the question.
That is, oh, wow. Okay. A pivotal moment. I think the first time I shared spoken word, like on a public, like large stage, really changed things for me. Because I think it was my first time sharing something that it wasn't just like a narrative aspect. It was really about my voice, my point of view, my message. And so competing, I was at, it was for UNC Wilmington's Hawk It Out talent show. And so my poem was about what is it like being Black at a predominantly white institution. Yeah. And so it's like in front of the chancellor, it's in front of like all of these other like professors and things like that. And being able to speak up, I think for everyone who looked like me and felt like me was a really big deal. And I was fortunate enough to win. So it was like, it was a really cool experience.
Awesome. Could you share a moment from your work that really strikes you?
A moment from my work that really strikes me. I would say one of my more recent projects, which is I Am Not Your Black Girl, that started off as just a spoken word. And then I have a friend who's a composer, and so she added on like the beat for it. And then I have another friend who's a cinematographer, and so it was like this super big collaborative effort. And I think that poem is something that I always go back to I think ground myself in my work and my identity. And a big part of that, like one of my favorite lines from that poem is, I am not your black girl, for I am not yours, I am mine. And I think that is just something that I wrote, I think, going on like 7 years ago now. And it's just been like this current foundational piece of work that I have I can continue to visit.
And there's something very special that happened with that work. You want to tell our listeners about that?
Yes. So that I Am Not Your Black Girl, the short film, it won Best Experimental Director for the Cannes Film Awards, which is really exciting.
Nice. Congratulations.
Yes, you
Thank
deserve all of it.
Thank you.
You do.
Thank you.
Now you have a program
Yes.
that you've started. Can you tell us about the program and the kind of work you're doing? Who does it serve? You know, who has been coming out?
Absolutely. So Black Creative Social Club is an organization that exists to bring together Black creatives in film and content creation through like various resources. So it might be I like posting like job opportunities or like guest speakers and things like that, or networking events. And so that was kind of created out of the original idea that after I graduated, I was working in the film industry, and it's incredibly white, it's incredibly male. And so you realize the film industry is definitely one of those fields where it's like, It's not about what you know, it's about who you know to get jobs. So really kind of creating a resource to lean more into offering people those networking opportunities and connections so they can get their foot in the door for film.
Oh, that is so nice.
Well, how did you come to that work? And like what has sustained you in it?
Like bringing people together and things like that. You're asking like in that regard?
Yeah. And like what is keeping you doing this work? Like what is it about the work that just, because I know as artists sometimes we get discouraged and like we turn away from things, but like what is keeping you doing this work?
That is such a good question, because I think recently, or like earlier this year, late last year, I was just very, very tired and I think exhausted in terms of creativity and organizing and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
But I think what I realized is that I find myself more depleted and more empty when I don't feed my creativity. So I think realizing that it's actually something I need to continue to prioritize, because when you don't and you think it's something I need to set aside so I can focus on like my big girl adulting things, I run out of juice way faster than when I actually, focus in on it.
Because the creative center is a deeper center to pull from than just actually needing to do.
Exactly. And I can imagine when you all do plays and stuff, like that's a huge thing to put on. And I know at the end of like, say for example, like the Color Purple, you had to be exhausted. Right? But
I'm still recovering. and yet I'm doing another show.
Which I can't wait to go see, The House That Gordy Built. That's going to be so great. But it's like you realize that it's like a method to the madness and continuing, and it's so fulfilling.
What are some of the barriers that you've seen going through this process of like getting more people to come into that social connection?
I think maybe I don't know. I think when people see the resource, it's they're excited about it. I think sometimes it can be hard because people don't know what it is they actually want to do, and especially with film, it's just like I just want to make a movie, and it's like there's a lot of aspects to that when you're trying to help someone kind of get their first job or develop their resume. I think sometimes people don't realize you have to do the work aspect. It's not just knowing people, you also still have to be capable of it.
Yeah.
And I think I've been in situations where I've tried to maybe help someone with a job, and then the feedback I get is like, hey, that person was too green. So it's like finding that that happy medium of helping people build their skill set so they can get to that next level and be ready for the opportunity when it presents, just as much as providing them with the opportunity.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of barriers, what are the barriers to participating in the arts? Yeah. How did you overcome those barriers?
That's a good question. Oof.
I know it's a loaded one, huh?
Yeah. Something I've actually really been sitting with recently, this idea of being an artist, specifically a Black artist, is that it constantly feels like our work has to be weighed down with the Black, like the Black label first. Like it can't just be art. Whenever I'm saying something, it's like, what are you saying about your existence as a Black woman or as a Black person? Like, but figuring out sometimes I just want to create something where that part of my existence doesn't necessarily have to be the forefront, because I know like probably my first demographic that I'm trying to create art for is for people who look like me, so I don't have to constantly say that I'm a Black woman, or you know what I mean? And so I think it's when I think of like film though, there's so many barriers of entry in terms of you're having to present and pitch your stories as a Black person to white people, and it's like having to figure out how they can see the validation in your story when it's not rooted in trauma or when it's not rooted in like slavery, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And allowing ourselves to be seen as dynamic and multifaceted, where to me, it's so much more power in showing diverse Black people versus continuing to show the same story over and over and over again, which tends to be a problem. So,
well, I'm so happy that you spoke to the trauma piece. I do feel like a lot of times when you look at our work in the arts, it's always rooted in that trauma. And that seems to be groundbreaking for people who aren't us. They think that this is like the most groundbreaking work when they can view our trauma in that way. And I just think that's very interesting you brought that up. Wow.
And also a part of that is sometimes, like, we have to ask the question, why is our trauma so much easier to be like commodified and valued versus like our joy, our peace, our exploration, and our self-discovery?
Absolutely.
Well, it's like trying to break the idea of the monolith for real.
Yeah.
Because being yourself, like, I shouldn't have to categorize you by your race in order to say you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Whether you be white, Hispanic, Native American, indigenous, whatever.
Yeah.
No one should have to pick your ethnicity and your culture to describe you. You are only going to be Ricki. You're only going to be Kevin. You're only going to be Terrill. And none of that has to do with your actual racial makeup.
Yeah.
Well, Ricki, what changes need to happen to the arts community? I mean, like, what would you like to see happen in coastal North Carolina?
I want to see more. I want to see more Black people in control of the opportunities. I want us to be intentional about creating spaces and opportunities where we can support one another and we can kind of be the deciding factor as to what happens and doesn't happen, and we can profit off of our own stories. So that is what I would say.
Wow. Yeah, and I would have to agree.
I definitely agree with that.
That is what drove me to my work, right? I feel like it's very, very important.
Like, if you're going to profit off of trauma, it should be your own, and no one else should be able to make money from telling your story, whether it's a good story or not.
Yeah.
No one should be paid for you.
Yeah. We don't want to be exploited. You know what I mean?
It's like I'm being bought.
Yeah.
So how are some ways people can get involved with your work?
So you can follow along with what I'm doing on social media at Black Creative Social Club. We have an email list that you can join if you go to blackcreativesocialclub.com, or you can follow my personal artistic journey at As Told by Ricki, Ricki, also on Instagram and TikTok.
Nice.
Wow. Well, Ricki, is there anything else you want to share with everyone, our listeners?
Is there anything else I want to say? I want to say, continue to create even when it feels like no one is listening.
Wow.
Yes. Yes, straight up. Because someone's going to hear finally.
Well, Ricki, we are so glad you could join us today. Thank you
for
so
having me.
Of course. Thank you for listening to another episode of Somewhere and Elsewhere. Listening to Ricki, we are reminded that we have the power in ourselves to be anything that it is we want to be, and to make ways for whoever we want to make ways for.
We've loved hearing about this work today.
And remember, dear listeners, art happens everywhere if you know where to look.
Amen.
Join us again next time as we share more stories and continue hearing stories from across coastal North Carolina's arts community.
Until then, keep your hearts open, your minds curious, and your spirits adventurous. This is Kevin and Terrill,
signing off from Somewhere and Elsewhere.
Safe travels, fellow arts lovers. Somewhere and Elsewhere is a podcast of Shoresides. Learn more about our work at www.shoresides.org.